Welcome to the hidden corners where truth and terror collide. Discover a realm where the lines between the living and the supernatural blur as you embark on a journey to the paranormal and visit the mysterious hidden corners of your mind.
Welcome to the Wolfman Chronicles. This is Chapter 6 of Book 8, Episode 96. Cambodia, Islands of Smoke and Shadows. Pain in Jack's side flared again as he tried to sit up straighter in the back seat of the van. The crude bandage that Nadia had tied around his ribs and his shoulder was already soaked through with blood, dark, sticky, and stubborn. Miguel gave him a worried glance from the driver's seat. "God, you should be in a hospital," he said flatly, gripping the wheel as they sped away from the remains of the Siem Reap warehouse. "Not bouncing around in this tin can with a punctured lung and a bullet in your shoulder." Jack managed a weak smile. Hospitals, they ask questions. Nadia turned around in her seat, her dark eyes filled with worry. "That knife was laced with something," she said, glancing again at the swelling that had begun to spread near the gash in Jack's side. "This doesn't look good." "He's lucky to be alive," Alexei said from the front passenger seat, looking grim. He hadn't spoken much since the fight and was in pain from his own wounds. "But you did it. Kamarov's empire just crumbled." Silence followed. Outside the window, the Cambodian countryside flickered by in shades of emerald and gold, humid and endless, but none of them celebrated. "Victor was just one," Nadia said finally. "One spider in a whole nest. There are others, hundreds more. The girls he sold, some are already gone. Some we won't find in time." "Which is why we have to keep going," Jack said through clenched teeth. "No." Alexei's voice was strong and clear. "Not now. You need rest. Your body won't survive another fight like that one, Jack. I want you to take a few days and heal. You need your strength." Jack leaned his head against the window, the humid glass cooling his fevered skin. "Where?" "Call Rong," Alexei answered. "Off the southern coast. It's quiet. It's private. It's off-grid. I'll arrange a contact to meet you there. His name's David. He's a doctor from Germany, and he runs a nice, quiet resort there on the island. He keeps a low profile, and he owes me a favor. He'll know how to mend Jack's wounds." Julian nodded, half to himself. "Sounds nice. How do we get there?" "Well, I'll get you a flight to Sihanoukville, and from there you'll take a ferry out to the island." The docks at Sihanoukville were a chaotic tangle of rusted steel and worn wood, salt-bleached tarps snapping in the wind. Cargo was stacked in uneven piles, plastic crates filled with bottled water, sacks of rice, crates buzzing with half-dead shrimp. The air, it stank of diesel fuel and fish guts, sweat, and trash. Dogs skulked beneath the walkways, licking salt off a discarded styrofoam. Vendors pushed carts up and down the narrow causeways, calling out in rapid Khmer, trying to sell fried banana chips and cheap SIM cards and knock-off sunglasses to the handful of backpackers passing through. The ferry, it sat low in the water, long and painted a dull yellow, with faded gold lettering along the bow that read, "Speed Ferry Cambodia." Well, it sure looked like it'd seen better days. But it was fast, and more importantly, unregistered under any government watch list. A teenage boy in flip-flops took their tickets, waved them aboard with a gap-toothed grin. No passport checks, no questions. Perfect. The interior of the boat was sparse and clean, and considering the number of passengers, it was easy to see why. Even on calm days, the boat rocked considerably, and if the water were choppy, the majority of the passengers ended up barfing. The crew, they hosed it off into the water before the next group of passengers boarded. Now, as the ferry pulled away from the crumbling port city, the scent of diesel mingled with salt and tropical rot filled the air. The water turned a deep bottle green, foaming white as the ferry cut through the surf. Wind whipped through the open cabin, catching strands of Natia's hair and tugging Jack's loose shirt against his bandages. He leaned back in his plastic seat, swaying slightly. Each breath was a stab, but the sea air helped. And off to the port side, jungle-covered islands began to appear, first as a distant shadow, and then as emerald peaks rising out of the sea. Khao Rong was the largest among them, ringed with pale sand and swaying palm trees, untouched coves tucked between limestone outcrops. It shimmered on the horizon, the turquoise waters of the Gulf of Thailand, the green jungles, and the powder-white sands. It was almost too beautiful to be real. Jack sat beside Nadia, eyes scanning the horizon, but his mind was clearly elsewhere. "This just feels wrong," he murmured. "To be going on vacation when there are girls still locked in basements?" Nadia looked at him, her voice low. "This isn't a vacation, Jack. It's survival. We're no use to anyone if we're dead. And if you don't take some time to heal, well, let's just say this might be your permanent resting place." Maybe we all need this," he said. "Even if it's just to remember what normal people live like." Well, this part of the island was quieter than expected. No tourists, no parties, just the hush of palm fronds. The small wooden bungalow sat nestled beneath a cluster of coconut trees, just steps from the water. "Don't expect much," David said gruffly as he handed them fresh towels and pointed to the hammocks. "Electricity's spotty, the internet's even worse. Mosquitoes and sand fleas are aggressive, but no one will find you here. You guys get settled in. I'll go grab my medic bag. I'll be right back." Jack collapsed onto the bed in his small bungalow, the tension in his body melting slowly. Nadia knelt beside him, unwrapping the bandage again. Oh, the wound was ugly, but it was healing. "You're lucky," she murmured, running cool water across his skin. "Well, thanks to you," he whispered. "I'm supposed to be keeping an eye on you, not the other way around." David, the host, returned with fresh gauze and bandages, along with sterile tools in his medic's bag, and set to work removing the bullet that was lodged in the soft muscle of Jack's shoulder. "Now, you're lucky he was a bad shot, whoever it was. He just missed your subclavian artery, and that bullet is sitting right here in this little pocket." "Well, I don't need a visual, Doc," Jack muttered, closing his eyes and breathing deep to avert the pain. "Now, this knife wound, well, it's going to need some stitches and some antibiotic. You got a lot of inflammation in there. But with some rest and good island food, you'll be good as new in no time. However, I would not recommend any swimming until you're fully healed." Jack winced in pain and breathed out a big sigh in response. And David continued on. "Alexei told me what you did. Taking on Kamarov and helping save those girls. You are more than welcome to stay here just as long as you like." Well, that was quite a generous offer. The bungalows were only feet away from the warm water of the Gulf, and the white sand beaches stretched far on either side. Hammocks hung over the water from large bamboo poles. There was a nice open-air restaurant and bar just up the beach, and several more tourist resorts dotting the shoreline. About a mile up the beach was a small village for supplies. Miguel returned from a fishing shack nearby with grilled crab and mangoes wrapped in banana leaves. Julian followed with a tray of Mai Tais. Gosh, when you're stuck in paradise, you may as well enjoy it, he laughed. That night, the moon hung high, casting a silver light over the ocean and the gently lapping surf. And Jack stood at the edge of the water, his silhouette stark against the tide. Nadia joined him, barefoot in the sand. Do you ever feel it, she asked, like there's something ancient behind all this? Something that's watching us and directing our course? Jack didn't answer. Well, not directly. But his thoughts drifted to the wolf. That ancient part of him did feel it. The way his life had taken on this new fight and how being in Cambodia had changed him, even in these few short weeks. We won't stop chasing them, he said quietly, even if it takes everything we've got. Miguel sat on the lanai with a laptop, poring over the data on the small zip drive that Alexei had handed him before they left for the island. You know, there's something in here, he said, finally. Kamarov may have just been a cog in a much larger wheel. See, there's a hub in Singapore and another in Bangkok. It looks like an intricate web of criminal activity that doesn't begin or end with Kamarov. This is bigger than we are, Julian replied. Taking out one guy isn't going to put an end to child trafficking. Honestly, I don't know what the answer is. Miguel rubbed his temples and leaned back in the rattan chair, the glow from the laptop casting long shadows across the thatched ceiling above him. The sea breeze carried the scent of salt and jasmine through the open lanai. He barely noticed. Down at the shore, the waves lapped gently at Nadia's ankles, warm and foamy. Several yards out, the bioluminescent plankton shone brightly, then faded in the moonlight. Jack stood at the edge of the water, his body aching all over. So this is what getting old feels like, he muttered quietly. We did something good, Nadia whispered, more to herself than to him, but it's like chopping off the head of a hydra. Another one's already grown back. Jack exhaled slowly. I used to think stopping one monster was enough, but this, he glanced back toward the lanai, this is a global machine. Komarov was just a middleman who thought he was powerful. Nadia shifted her weight in the sand. Her brow was furrowed. What if this is part of something ancient? Something that feeds on suffering? What if we're not just fighting people? What if we're up against something older than the idea of right and wrong? Jack raised an eyebrow, but he didn't respond right away. The wolf inside of him stirred, not with hunger, but with recognition. Something primal had awoken inside the both of them during this trip to Cambodia. Of that he was certain. You're sounding awfully philosophical, he replied softly. Nadia nodded at that. It's just that it's hard to believe that this kind of evil exists in the world. All of it. What is this about the human mind that can feed off such atrocities? Human suffering, torture, genocide, abuse, and trafficking? I just can't wrap my head around it. Well, that's because you're a good person, Nadia. And thankfully, there are many good people in the world. Now, you can't lose sight of that. But throughout history, there have been those that chose the path into darkness. Then, we must fight fire with fire, she said quietly. We use something older and deeper. We use the darkness. We don't back down, even if it kills us. Jack looked into her eyes. The silver moon reflected in both of their gazes. I don't like the sound of that. The lantern light flickered as the ocean wind picked up, rustling the palm fronds and setting shadows dancing across the walls of the bungalow. Crickets chirped beneath the porch. A pale moon hung low over the water, casting the jungle in soft silver light. Inside the bamboo-walled bungalow, Jack rested on a mat beneath the open windows. The bandages around his ribs clean now. The fever had broken. Nadia, Miguel, and Julian sat around a low table, maps and notebooks spread out between them like a war council. A lantern burned brightly on the table. The door creaked open and David stepped in, barefoot, wiping his hands on a linen towel. "Well, we're closing up the kitchen. Anything I can get you all?" He leaned back against the wooden post, arms folded, and lit a cigarette. "Alexei filled me in on our mission," David said. I want to know how I can help." "You're helping by letting us stay here and tending to my wounds," Jack said gratefully. Yeah, David laughed. "But there's other reasons Alexei sent you here. I keep a close eye on what's happening on the borders. We've got people on the front line, like Alexei and Dara, and we've got people, like myself, that monitor things from a distance. See, we're the hidden ones, doing our work from remote locations, like Call Wrong. Alexei said Kamarov had connections in Bangkok," Jack said, eyes narrowed. "Do you know anything about that?" David nodded. Yeah. Kamarov used to funnel girls through Thailand before they disappeared. Most were smuggled across the border, but lately," he paused, glancing at Nadia, "there's been talk of a new player operating out of the north from the Chiang Rai province, near the Golden Triangle." Julian gave a low whistle. "Now, I've heard of the Golden Triangle. Isn't that where the old opium trade was based?" David flicked ash into the sand. "Still is in some ways. It's where the borders of Thailand, Laos, and Burma meet. Now, back in the 50s and the 60s, the CIA coined the term the Golden Triangle to describe the lucrative opium trade in that region. And it's famous for being one of the world's most notorious drug-producing and traffic regions, especially for opium and heroin. It's very remote, very mountainous with heavy, dense forests. That makes it really difficult to police. The Mekong River runs through it, so that serves as a major transportation route. Actually, I really think it's only second to Afghanistan for poppy cultivation and opium and heroin production. But since synthetic drugs like methamphetamine have taken over, it's not poppy fields anymore. It's people they're selling. Ghost children, they call them. Born without documents, without citizenship. They're the perfect prey. They come from the impoverished ethnic groups or migrants from neighboring countries. There's no real law to speak of, and most of the local networks are corrupt. So, seriously, this area is a hotbed for organized crime, illegal logging, wildlife trafficking, and especially child and labor trafficking. Oh, there's tourism and all the resorts and museums, but underneath the glamour, all kinds of underworld activity remains, especially deeper in the mountains and the rural territories. Jack's jaw tightened. "I had no idea," Nadia whispered. David exhaled slowly. "Let me tell you a story. Well, it's a true story. In the shadowy forests of Chiang Rai, there's a long-forgotten temple that lies just at the edge of the known map. Its cracked walls are covered in vines. Its bell tower is silent for years, and its gates are guarded by men who do not speak. Yet villagers say they hear chanting at night in languages that they don't recognize. And in the morning, new graves appear outside the monastery walls, unmarked. The people around Chiang Rai won't even walk past the temple at night. They say it's cursed." David hesitated at that. "Thailand is different. See, they're a superstitious people. You'll find spirits everywhere. Forest ghosts, hungry ones, vengeful ones. Almost every home, business, and government building in Thailand has a spirit house. It's just a miniature shrine on a pedestal. placed outside the main structure, which are built to appease the guardian spirits of the land, who might otherwise cause mischief if not respected. And the people come along and make offerings of flowers, food, water, incense, daily. Locals believe that if you disrespect or fail to maintain a spirit house, bad luck or supernatural disturbances can follow. He leaned in slightly. The light from the lantern flickered in his eyes. No one knows what started it. Some say the monks abandoned the spirit house and brought bad luck to the temple. Others say a girl, mute and deaf, was brought to the temple after being found wandering alone in the jungle. The monks took her in, fed her, sheltered her, but then she began to scream. Not speak, scream. Every night at the same hour. There were never any words spoken. David's voice dropped as the lantern on the table sputtered in a draft. Beyond the open shutters, the jungle rustled with nocturnal life, yet somehow it felt like the trees were holding their breath. Soon after that, animals began to vanish from the hills. The frogs fell silent. Farmers said the hills were too quiet, like the sound had been sucked away. Then came the footprints, always appearing at night. Strange prints left around the rice paddies and on rooftops, bare feet, but twisted, too long, like someone had broken the bones before walking. Then the villagers started disappearing. Children, women. A merchant's wife was found in the rice fields. Her feet were bare, her eyes open, face turned to the sky. No sign of struggle, but her heart was gone. Not torn out, just gone, like it was never there. Wat May Lawn lay abandoned after that, he continued, his voice gravelly and slow. The monks stopped coming to market. Pilgrims who traveled to the temple were never seen again. He looked at Jack, then at Nadia. Julian scoffed. Hell, that sounds like a legend. David didn't even blink. Isn't everything? Until it's not. Then came the smoke. Not fire. Smoke without flame. Pouring out of the trees like a living thing. Black as ink. Thick as soup. The villagers said it would follow you if you looked back. One boy said he heard whispering in it. A woman's voice. Begging. Screaming. David stared at her. The boy hung himself 2 days later. No note, no warning, just gone. Miguel swallowed. And no one investigated this? Oh, they did, David said. A group of government officials came from Chiang Rai, investigators with drones. They brought gear, sensors, cameras. The village warned them not to stay past dark. He paused. They stayed anyway. The locals saw flashes in the sky, like heat lightning, but purple. Then nothing. No signal, no return. A search team was sent in. They found the camp. Tents were shredded like paper. Equipment and drones burned. And the men? Nadia asked. Well, they found two. One was lying within a circle of salt. They found two. One was lying in a circle of salt, fingers curled around a charm bag. Eye sockets empty. Mouth was full of dirt and black feathers. The other, well, he'd carved scripture into his own skins over and over. Open the door and wake the horned one. What about the rest? Miguel asked him. Never found. The villagers sealed the temple. They built new spirit houses at each corner of the forest to warn people away. But the place didn't stay quiet. Locals say they hear chanting at night. Others hear screams. Some hear the bell ringing in darkness. There's rumors of possession, madness, and disappearances if anyone goes too near. Though that temple's been abandoned for decades and left to ruin, the locals all believe that an evil spirit is guarding the forest, and the locals call him Kun Sang Wat, the master of the temple. He guards the trail and uses fear to keep the villagers and the law out of the way. Alexei, he believes he's real. Not a ghost, but a man. He thinks he's using fear and deception to keep the locals away and hide what he's really doing, which is trafficking girls. He's made the jungle into his fortress, using fear like a wall. Miguel stared out into the shadows. So it's not just a haunting. David nodded. It's a cover. It's a disguise. And a damn good one. He's got free reign since no one goes near that temple anymore. Locals call it Ban Wat Chong Gan, the Temple of the Crossing, where the dead move between worlds. And some say the monks were never monks at all, that the temple was always evil. Julian shook his head. So what, a temple full of ghosts? David gave a hollow chuckle. Possibly. But now that Kun Sang Wat has taken it over, the old fear is being used as a weapon. The screams in the jungle, the eyes in the dark, maybe they're not just superstition, maybe they're by design. He turned towards the door, then paused. You see, Alexei believes that Kun Sang Wat is using the temple as a cover, yes, but also as a recruitment ground. You see, fear breaks people, makes them pliable, makes them easy to move, easy to sell. When someone disappears around there, no one even asks questions. No one files a report, because no one wants to believe it's a real human stealing these people. Now, they think it's a ghost or demon, and well, how do you fight that? He looked back once more at Jack. You want to stop trafficking? You have to step into the dark where it begins. And with that, David left the bungalow, heavy with silence. Julian poured the last of the wine into his cup. Haunted temples, ghost traffickers in monk robes, vanishing children. Great. Just another week in Southeast Asia. Jack didn't smile. He looked at the dark ocean beyond the bungalow and thought of the bell ringing in the forest. The silence that wrapped itself too tightly around places that men weren't meant to enter. The next week, Jack said, standing slowly, we go ghost hunting. As the cool breeze shifted the soft fabric of the mosquito netting over the bed, Jack slept fitfully. He was no longer a man, but a wolf, all muscle and fur and instinct, his paws pounding over leaf-littered trails, hot breath fuming in the night air. The jungle was alive with whispers. Voices from the trees, not in Khmer, not in English, but in some ancient dialect that made the hairs rise along his spine. It was the voice of the Pai, the forest spirits, dead things. They darted between tree trunks, shifting shapes as they ran. A girl with no face, a man with no mouth, and a child with hollow eyes. They laughed, high and cruel, and vanished into the leaves. Jack's snarl echoed like thunder. He chased them deeper, past spirit houses covered in vines, past old bones strung from tree branches like wind chimes. A bell tolled in the distance. The temple's bell, old and warped with rust. The jungle floor pulsed under his paws like a heartbeat. And then he saw it. The temple, with its crumbling stone walls swallowed by vines, red cloth fluttering from its roof like torn flesh. The front gates stood wide open, yawning like a mouth. The air was thick with incense and rot. A figure waited there, just beyond the threshold. Not human, not animal, wrapped in saffron robes, but with black antlers curling from its head and skin the color of blood. Its eyes were burning coals, and it was smiling. Jack leapt toward it, jaws wide, and the ground disappeared beneath him. Jack woke, his sheets cold and wet with sweat. The dream was fading, but the sound of the bell still rang in his ears. He was shaking as he picked up his phone from the night table, glancing to see the time. There were several unread messages from Sasha, along with missed calls. He put the phone back on the night table. God, he missed her horribly. But he wasn't ready to come home. Not yet. And he wasn't sure how to explain that to her. Deep in the jungle, somewhere beyond the trees, a dog howled. He sat up slowly, his hand pressing to his ribs. The wolf was still awake within him, and something was calling. Back home in Alaska, Sasha's laptop glowed in the early morning dark. The ticket confirmation was open. Anchorage to Bangkok via Seoul. 2 passengers, Sasha and Rachel. Departure in 3 days. Sasha closed the lid with a quiet snap and turned towards the window. Outside, the Alaskan summer light was already beginning to break, casting her face in half shadow. Rachel was asleep in her room the first night of summer break. But Sasha's mind was already in the jungle with Jack and Nadia, with the darkness they were walking into. With their absence, with Jack's absence, she felt hollow, as if her heart had been pulled out of her chest, and she just wasn't going to wait any longer.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode, and I hope you'll join us next week for another installment of the Wolfman Chronicles. And until then, have a great week, everyone.